All right, cool. So
Cool.
let's start it up. We are here today with Mikala McClain. What a great name.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
excited
and
to be here.
yeah, me too, because you are a mother, a wife, a businesswoman, entrepreneur. Been through a lot, and I feel like you have such a great story. I just wanted to get you on, and you're a member of our community. We've worked together a little bit. I've learned a lot about you, and I just wanted to get you on here and see if we could share your story and pull some insights from it that other people can learn from. How's that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So, can you just give a brief introduction to yourself? Because you can probably do that way better than I can.
Yeah. So I'm a registered nurse by trade. And I became a nurse because I really wanted to help people. I think most people enter into the nursing field for that. Also because there's job stability, but I think a huge chunk of it is that, you're a people person, you want to help people. It was like within my first year of nursing, I was like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. Like it was just pushing pharmaceuticals. I never felt like I was really helping people.
Hmm.
Because when you're in the hospital, we're compartmentalizing the body and we're looking at whatever is going wrong. So maybe you're there for diabetes or surgery or whatever, but we're just looking at that and we're not saying, well, what's your environment like? What are you eating? Do you have authentic connection? Are you under a lot of stress? And looking at the big picture. And so it was just like, oh, here's some meds, and now I'm going to push you along your way. And so it was really disheartening. Like, I hated how Western medicine compartmentalized the human body.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had a hard time finding like my niche in nursing. But I had that degree, and so I kind of had to jump around for a while and landed in psych. So I've been a psych nurse for about 10 plus years, and I love it. But still, that comes into play where they're in the psych hospital and we're feeding them crap, and it's like, well, this is a component we could be looking at. Or they're like put into isolation, and it's like, okay, well, we know that humans need co-regulation to be able to connect with another person to thrive, and we're taking that away from them. So there's a big disconnect often in my true beliefs, and what I practice for my day to day in kind of what I have to show up as when I'm a nurse. So I started my own company called Astra. Women heal the trauma, emotional blocks, but we look at everything where it's what you're eating, what are you exercising, kind of what movement are you incorporating, what kind of connection do you have. But really looking at trauma, that's kind of our jam, and regulating the nervous system. And then I'm a psych facilitator, which means I help women, and I say women because that's basically our company is really focused on helping women, but I work with like my husband and close friends, so I work with men as well when I do the psych case stuff, and that helps rewire beliefs. So that's kind of the picture. And then I'm a mom. My daughter's like about 18 months, so I would say a very new mom still.
Yeah. And then you're also hosting retreats, right? Or is this
Yeah,
one coming up? Is that your first one?
yeah,
Or have you done these
absolutely.
before?
So,
Okay,
yeah. No, so
cool.
this is gonna be our first retreat. I'm excited because I've hosted all the things individually
Hmm.
before, but now we're putting them all together as one big retreat. So I've facilitated like breath workshops or cacao ceremonies, and my site case stuff. I've done individual sessions with that, but I've never put it into a big weekend. So I'm really excited to kind of to have these profound breakthroughs for the women who attend, coupled with like really fun stuff like ecstatic dance and the cacao stuff. So it will be these big breakthroughs, but not so intense where you're like, crying on the floor. We'll also have like that fun
It'll be a
connection
good time
feeling.
still.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, cool. So I want to get more details about that, but let's talking about like your journey. I remember us discussing like you had done figure competitions or fitness competitions or something like that, and you felt like you kind of got into some dysmorphia. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think very often when we try to solve a problem, it's because an issue we're facing ourselves, right? So for me, I really struggled with body dysmorphia since I can remember. I mean, it was so intense. And that was like most of my life. And so for people who don't know what body dysmorphia was, because honestly, I didn't know it was for a long time, like I didn't know how to name, was I just wasn't happy with the person I was looking in the mirror, right? So it was like every time I looked at myself, I always felt like I had just like a fat suit on. And I was in really good shape, especially for that fitness competition. I dropped my body percent fat down to like 10 or 15, like something super low. I could see my abs, and like everyone around me was like, oh my God, you're so fit. but there was still things I could pick out, be like, oh, but if this was better, then I
Hmm.
would love myself more. And it was always these like external things that I thought I could fix in order to find that internal validation. And so
Well, you
for
said
me, for
that
body,
started very, very early on. So, do you remember what that was? Like what?
yeah, so it actually took, I mean, like a bit of therapy and probably something we specialize in what we do is parts work or completion process, two different types of therapy.
Yeah, we learned a little bit about that in NLP, neuro
Oh,
linguistic
okay.
programming. Yep.
Yeah. So it's like with parts work, I mean, and we all talk about parts in a sense, right? Like, oh, there's a part of me that feels motivated and wants to do this,
Hmm.
but there's a part of me that is tired and lazy, or there's a part of me that's excited to do this podcast, but there's a part of me that's afraid that I'm going to say something wrong, right? So we always
Hmm.
have these parts, but it's about like in context with the body dysmorphia. There was a part of me when my mom passed away. She passed away when I was about 11 years old from breast cancer. And when that happened, there was a part of me that splintered off that really needed to be independent and strong and show that everything was okay. And in that, it started like, what can I control? Because as an 11-year-old with your mom passing, there's so much in your environment that you can't control. And thinking that if I could control something, I would feel safe. And so then I started controlling the way I looked. And that allowed me to take some type of chaos that was going on in my external environment and be able to control something myself. So doing parts work was one of the things that helped me bring awareness to that,
Hmm.
right? And then start seeing like, oh, this is kind of where that started.
So it sounds like that was useful to figure that out, to have
Yeah.
that realization. So hey, we're
Okay.
back. Technical difficulties, phone overheated in the vehicle.
Yeah. Shut down.
But but I had asked you, so it was useful to figure out like where that initiated
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
the body dysmorphia piece of it.
Yeah, because if I didn't have that awareness, I think I would have continually tried to change my external environment, continually tried to change the way my body looked, so that I was then could change the feeling. I was looking for a feeling, right? I was looking for that, uh, unconditional love for myself, no matter what I looked like, no matter how I was showing up, that I still had, grace and understanding and respect and love for my body. And as I was trying to change those things externally, it's like it never really worked, and I think I would have hit that point eventually, just kind of like, how come no matter what I'm doing, I
Hmm.
don't feel that unconditional love for myself.
Yeah. So what was it like in were you a fitness competitor or figure competitor? What was it?
Yeah, I did the NPC bikini competition.
Okay.
Um, and I mean, I looked phenomenal. Like I look back at pictures now, especially like post baby body that I'm working to get back to my,
Hmm.
I would say like optimal figure. And I look back at those pictures and I was like, oh my God, like I had an amazing body. But in that moment, at that time, I didn't believe that. So, of course, like feeling healthy and looking good matters, and that
Hmm.
changes a little bit. Like if I'm 100 pounds overweight, I'm going to feel a little bit different about myself if I'm in my maximal like body zone, right? Of course there's that difference, but
Hmm.
there still should be that compassion and love for yourself, and that's really what I was missing.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a piece of this in all of us, and it's a spectrum, right? And there's degrees of it, and at some point on the spectrum, it would be considered dysmorphia. But it also sounds like through that experience, you learned some really great tools. And I'm assuming that's what we can talk about when we get into the polyvagal therapy and things like that. Like
Yeah.
I keep hearing this term about feeling, seeing yourself different or something.
Yeah.
So, what was your diet like when you were doing that? Was it like the typical bodybuilding? Like, what were you?
Yeah. Like I
What
will
was
never
it? Chicken
eat
and rice?
yeah, I'll never eat tilapia again in my entire life, ever.
Oh,
Like I can't do it.
yeah.
I hate it. It was chicken, sweet potatoes. There was a time I was able to go like keto and I was allowed to have salmon,
Mm,
avocado, and then greens. Like I could have unlimited amount of greens, but like I don't really like greens anyway. So it was just like,
yeah.
you know, the
And how
very
long ago was
bland.
that? How long ago was that when you were doing? What was
Uh,
the competition year?
I think 2 years ago.
Oh wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that was after we met, right? So
Yeah.
and by the way, just to say how we met, like we met, I can't remember when it was, 2015 or 16 or something like that. And you
Mhm.
guys had hired me to help you with a nutrition program or something like that with a CrossFit gym or a couple of CrossFit gyms.
Yeah, so our first
Yeah.
company was actually consultants for gyms and studios. And we're helping them get clients in. And so we were helping them run like certain programs. And with that, we needed a nutrition component. And so we needed a mass, basically something that could be cookie cutter for thousands of people to do. And that would fit all, I mean, it sounds so stupid now, like saying this, but it was something we need some sort of like diet that they could lose a large amount of weight in a short period of time. Because the challenges were like typically 6 weeks. So we needed something we could prescribe them within 6 weeks in order to lose as much weight as possible. Yeah. And that's was the old school before I really, dove into better understanding of just how to nourish your body.
Yeah. And maybe you learned a little bit from like going through my stuff there. Like, did that help nudge you in that direction a little bit, maybe? Because I know
absolutely.
It was kind of counter, maybe what you had been doing or used to or something like that.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned this to you before. It was about your bacon butter
Beef, butter,
and beef.
bacon.
Yeah, makes beautiful bodies.
Which we've changed now because I think you and I both are kind of on the same page. It's now it's beef, butter, and broth make beautiful bodies, and bacon and chicken we don't eat that often. So
yeah.
But back to the bodybuilding days and is there anything that we want to say to finish that out? Like, what was the victory coming out of that, or
Yeah, I mean, that helped me realize that I was eating for aesthetics and I wasn't eating to feel good. So when I was doing the bodybuilding, I mean, mind you, also on top of that, my coach had me go to the gym in the morning for 45 minutes to do 45 minutes of the Stairmaster. Then I would eat oatmeal and a protein shake, and I would do an hour of lifting with her. And then at night, I would go back and do 45 minutes of the Stairmaster again. So like my body was just so exhausted, like doing that amongst like also a normal day of work and everything else, right? So like I was just burning so many calories, eating so few calories. So I was just in such a deficit that like my brain just couldn't even function. It was like, I need some damn carbs up here. And so it was like,
and you know what? That sounds like a lot of people that are not trying to train for a figure competition. Like when you say that, it's like the more I can get to the gym, the better. The more I can cut what I'm eating, the better. The more I can be restrictive. And you experienced it firsthand. I mean, this is, a lot of the symptoms that you and I come across when people come to us for help.
Yeah.
Maybe not that extreme, but yeah.
Yeah. But then it really helped me realize it's like, it's so important to understand what your goal is in the beginning of any sort of health journey. So my goal was to look aesthetically pleasing on stage, and therefore I ate a certain way, but I felt like shit. I didn't sleep well. My hormones are out of whack. I lost my period for like a year, right? So it was like, it did all these things to me mentally, but I looked good on stage, So now it's like, well, what's my goal? Right. And so how do I eat to support that? And how do I exercise to support that? And it's vitality, it's energy, it's be able to show up with my daughter, it's be able to manage my emotions. Like when you're really tired and exhausted, it's hard to manage, or it's harder to manage your emotions. So I think that's why it's just so important in the beginning to understand what your goal is.
Yeah, I love that, connecting with your vision and really, really thinking about like, what is it I'm trying to do here? And it just so happens that what you're doing makes you still look amazing anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe not figure competition ready, but well, that's first of all, I know that had to be challenging, but it sounds like that's a big part of what made you who you are today. Because you mentioned in your intro about the nursing piece of it, is there anything that we can talk about there? When you became a nurse initially, did you already have a pretty good concept or grasp on real food and eating for health and things like that?
Yeah.
And so were you like immediately disillusioned when you when you got into it?
Yeah, I mean, so I was raised really well. I mean, God bless my dad, because he cooked. He was a single dad of four of us, and he cooked us all of our meals. Like he would get up in the morning, we'd have breakfast before we went to school. He'd make sure he packed our lunches, and he'd make dinner. And he was a really good chef, and he loved like farmers market and fresh food. And so, like, I remember spending the night at a friend's house once, and they had TV dinners, and I was like, "What the?" I mean, I had never seen one before. I didn't know what it was. I was like, "What is this?" So I was raised really well when it comes to the knowledge about nutrition and food. My dad always cooked with butter, and we'd have good meat and grilling. I mean, like that was like my foundation.
Yeah. I wonder what modern Mikala would it would be like for you to go into a modern household now.
Yeah.
Because it's beyond TV dinners, but anyway.
No, and it happens with a lot of our clients when I have to, dive into what they're eating, and the idea of, I'm eating healthy because I'm eating keto bread, or I'm eating healthy because I'm eating like the low carb tortillas, or, we don't eat fast food, but we eat, still food that's cooked in seed oils and all. So it has definitely opened my eyes. And so when I transitioned into being a nurse, I was like, oh my God, this is a whole different world that I'm going to have to educate people on. But the room wasn't there for that, right? So like in my own company, of course, but as a nurse, like there's a certain paradigm I have to fit into, and the things that I can present to my clients and talk to them about. And and I'll never forget this. One of the things that just like made my jaw drop. Of course, I didn't show the emotion, but I was talking to a patient who had been diabetic for like 20 years, and type 2 diabetes, mind you. And I was like, okay, well, we have to go through the basic diabetic teaching. I'm going to go over some foods that are beneficial to eat. He was like, oh, I've had diabetes for 20 years. I don't need that. I already know. And then he was telling me what he ate, and it was like canned peaches. And I mean, he was like, and I get plenty of fruit. And he's like, yeah, it's canned. And it's like, yeah, but like most of the time that's like saturated in syrup, and you know what I mean? So it was like the foundational knowledge of what to eat is just so skewed that, yeah, it was like, as a nurse, I'm like, oh, here's medication, but like, we're not really fixing the thing that needs to be fixed. I mean, and it's not just food, but like that's it. Of course, that's a huge piece. We now know that, sugar and a diet full of processed foods can lead to depression. And there's certain foods that can actually increase schizophrenic symptoms, right? So it's like,
so you're in this situation, and you're like, you kind of have this knowledge that you want to share, but you're kind of limited by your scope of practice, and had to be challenging. How did that impact or shape, who you are and where you're at today?
Yeah, I mean, it fueled the passion for my own company, and it allowed me to open that up and not have any boundaries with what I was able to talk about and what I was able to help people with, so. Maybe if I hadn't become a nurse and was put into the field like that, then I wouldn't have seen the disparity. And my passion probably wouldn't be as strong as it is now with Astra to be able to help people in a holistic way, being able to look at everything.
Yeah. So the contrast kind of strengthened what it is that you felt like you wanted,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's powerful. That's really powerful. You had mentioned your father earlier, and then you had also mentioned in a previous conversation, didn't he pass away somewhere?
Yeah. Yeah. So he passed away.
So, do you mind talking about that? I don't,
yeah.
You do mind?
No, I don't mind. I don't mind. No, I can't talk about it.
Okay.
I mean, it's still hard for me, like he passed a year ago, and like I had
that's so soon.
Yeah. And it feels, I mean, of course, when you lose someone, it feels like just yesterday, and it's been hard for me.
A year is relatively soon.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I think what's so hard is my mom passed when I was 11, and I still have that grief, right? There's still that pain that I don't have my mom. And with my daughter, there's tons of things that I wish I could share with her or ask her about, especially like in the newborn stage. I was like, is this normal? So it's like to be able to have those parents to reach to, is different. It's something that I think people who do have their parents take for granted, or, so not having my mom already and then losing my dad, it was like, I think I stayed in denial for a while because it's like I just didn't want to accept the grief, because grief's forever. It's of course, we change our perception to it, and it's like over time the intensity, duration, and frequency decrease, and you start to look at what you're grateful for and how you can appreciate it. But in the beginning, it's just like it's heavy, it's a burden, and we all respond to it differently. So it's still something I'm, of course, dealing with, but
it also sounds like it's impacting the way that you are as a parent, as a mother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just like with the nursing, the contrast, the I guess the trauma that you experience with it also probably fuels your fire to be like a freaking amazing mother.
Yeah. Well, and also it's like, I mean, when you're in the thick of it, it's not a time to, like, when you're in the thick of grief, it's not a time to think like, oh, other people are feeling this. But when there is a little bit of clarity, it's like, we just went through a pandemic. Millions of people have died unexpectedly. There were people who were healthy that actually didn't have comorbidities, that were perfectly fine, went into the hospital and then died alone. These were people that passed away that weren't even allowed to have their loved ones come visit them and be by their side. And so it's like, I started kind of connecting with that and feeling really moved of like, at least I was able to be supported by my family, and, I'm not alone in this, right? I mean, there's just so many people who've lost loved ones recently, every day, because, people die every day, but just, in context.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a powerful journey, and I know a lot of people probably resonate with that. We all have things that we go through, but just to be able to take those things that have happened to you and kind of have it fuel what it is that you consider to be your passion right now. I think that's really, really awesome. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the, what do you call it? The polyvagal therapy. Is it a good time to kind of segue into that, the polyvagal
Yeah.
therapy?
Yeah. So,
Maybe just give us an idea because you mentioned that. So throughout your life, you've had these traumatic experiences. And just what I remember, the body dysmorphia, the disillusionment with the being the nurse, the father passing away, and then not traumatic, but like a big life event, being a mother and all that. And then you mentioned this therapy that you came across, and it sounds like it's a feeling kind of thing. So maybe you could just explain a little bit about what it is.
yeah. So it's really interesting. I've been doing this work for about 2 years, like helping other women in kind of this path of this holistic approach. And I was seeing just like our shortcomings with like no matter if we had all the tools, we gave them all the support, everything they needed could be was there, all the knowledge, we were helping them show up but there was still something that lacked. And it was that connection of like the root cause of their trauma and what's preventing them to be able to, whatever it is for them to be consistent or self-sabotaging behavior or limiting beliefs or um, yeah, I guess limiting beliefs kind of all encompassing on that. And so I started learning about polyvagal theory. It's by Stephen Porges. And then Deb Dana is the psychologist or the therapist that brings it into context to like be able to utilize it for your day-to-day life. And it actually helps you understand your nervous system. And our nervous system is number one goal is for our survival. And so we pick up cues of safety and danger. So let's think back, when we were cavemen and there was a tiger or a bear, that our nervous system picked up that cue immediately. And so we didn't have to think like, oh, is this safe? Is this dangerous? Should I run? Like we'd be eaten. So we need something that like innately ingrained in our body that helped us survive. But now we're in modern day.
Just like if a guy came in with a shotgun and held you up, you wouldn't think too much about it.
Yeah,
Like
like
you do
you need
something
to
or
respond.
yeah, or even like
Yeah.
we said the other day, like a ball coming at your face, or
Yeah.
something being thrown at you. Like you're immediately gonna like react to that without thinking about it consciously, and that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. So
yeah.
we have different states of our nervous system. There's three main states. Dorsal is
Whoa,
like our
three
what?
mainstays. I thought there's
Yeah,
like the oh,
two.
I thought there's a sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Yep. It's not.
Okay.
There's dorsal, which also blew my mind as a nurse because I was taught the same thing that we have parasympathetic, which is our rest
Mhm.
digest, sympathetic or fight or flight, and then we actually have dorsal. And dorsal is the one that first evolved in mammals. It first originated from like a fish. And there's that hierarchy. So dorsal first evolved because it was like that play dead almost. So think of like a turtle, right? So it's like it goes slow. If it feels a threat, it can retreat into its shell. And so
Hmm.
that was like our first defense mechanism as we evolved along that evolutionary chain. So it's to be able to like retreat because we didn't really have much of a way to defend ourselves. And then as
So,
it, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to confirm. So in this way of looking at things, you've got sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest and digest, and then you've got almost like a play dead or
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So that
dorsal. Okay.
the dorsal play dead is what evolved first, and then we went into that flight or fight because now we're able to move, we're able to run,
Hmm.
we're able to stay and fight if we feel like we'd be able to actually win. So then there's that fight or flight, and then what evolved next, and that this is only for some mammals, is the ventral vagal, and that's the connection, and that's able to co-regulate our nervous system. And so that in context is like a mother being able to regulate their child's nervous system. So the daughter's crying and I'm able to hold her and shush her and bounce her. And so now my nervous system is connecting with hers and it's regulating hers.
So is
Um,
that a fourth one or is that part of the dorsal one?
that's part of ventral vagal. So you can
Okay.
think of it as like a stoplight. So we have red, yellow, green.
Mm-hmm.
Green is where we want to be most of the time. That's where we are in flow state, where we can connect, where we can support one another. Yellow is that fight or flight, where chronic stress. This is where physical symptoms start to come up. And then we have dorsal, which is that withdrawn, disengaged, play dead almost. So if you're in dorsal, which to put this in context, I was, and this is why it was so beautiful to have this understanding, is I'm able to give myself um, just like that grace, and instead of having shame and judgment when I went into dorsal and my dad died. So when my dad
Hmm.
passed, like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to get out of bed. Like I was just so like the world wasn't worth living. Like it was just so heavy for me. And I was in dorsal, I was completely disengaged. And so I would be in activities. It was really difficult for me to be present. Um, I just like what couldn't hear what people a lot of times like what they were saying. Like even if someone was trying to say something nice about my dad, stuff like I just couldn't even show up. And so I knew what dorsal was. I was like, okay, this is what my nervous system is in. I was able to give
Hmm.
myself grace and be like, okay, like how is my nervous system showing up for me today? And then how can I honor that and respect that?
So
And then
maybe, so you're saying like recognizing, having the ability, first of all, knowing these different states, and then having the ability to notice when you're in a certain state is useful because you can give yourself some self-compassion, or maybe
yeah,
it gives you an idea of what you can do to move yourself out of it or something like that. Is
yeah.
that what you're
And
saying?
so my
Yeah.
big thing about it's about befriending your nervous system. And what that means is you
Oh, I
go
love that.
from, all right, is you go from reacting in your life to responding. And
Mm,
so if you're in a sympathetic state, and we go through all these states throughout the day. So I'm just going to give you a quick example. Let's say you are running late for work. And so you jump in your car and you're like kind of frantic because you're running late. So you're a little bit sympathetic. And then you hit traffic. So you're getting a little bit more unsympathetic. And then maybe a cop car comes by and you think you're getting pulled over. So now you're more heightened in that sympathetic fight or fight. You're stressed. But then you realize the cop's not chasing you. So you like calm down a little bit. You're like, okay, like I didn't get pulled over. You're going a little bit more back to ventral, which is that green state. You get to work and your boss is like super nice and they gave you a project you wanted to work on. So now you're back into that green state, right? So you can see like with the flexible nervous system, you bounce through these states throughout the day. And that's
hmm.
what's so important, is to have that flexible nervous system. Um, and so you bring that awareness of like, okay, how am I feeling? So instead of quickly responding and reacting, you're able to check in with yourself. And then that then allows you to change the way you're showing up, because you have that split second of reflecting before you immediately just respond. Because we want to be friends with our emotions, right? We don't want our emotions just
Hmm.
to take control of us. We want to be able to honor them and feel them, but then react in a certain way.
Yeah, and it also sounds like mindfulness, or combined with mindfulness, because if you take the time to sit and ask yourself, where am I right now?
Yeah.
That in and of itself has to shift you a little bit, right? Just to
Yeah.
take that pause. And then responding versus reacting means that you have that pause, and then you can ask the question, and then do something to move yourself into a different state.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also
I
changes
love
the
it.
way you,
I
you
love it.
communicate with people. So
Hmm.
my husband and I both, he knows all of this as well. He kind of went down that journey with me about the nervous
Oh yeah, you'd be
system.
like, oh, you're dorsal right now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you
Yeah.
some
So
space. Yeah,
exactly. So it's
yeah.
like, and when I say it too, like I'll come home from work and I'm like, oh, I'm really unsympathetic. Let me take a hot shower and then we can
Mm.
talk. So it's just the way, and it's kind of the lens you start to see the world once you learn this stuff, where it's like you're dealing with someone, you're like, okay, they're in dorsal, they're clearly not hearing what I'm saying. What's a different approach I can take, or do I just need to come back to this, or so it helps you navigate things differently, and so you're able to connect with others in a different way, or like especially in my role, when people are like really in a sympathetic state, or they're facing anxiety, or they're going through trauma, and I need to hold space for them, and I need to show up as that safe co-regulation, calm connection. Like it allows me to say like, okay, this is where I need to be with myself to help them.
I love it. I think that's so powerful.